You ready? Let's do it. Welcome to the Uncut Podcast. I'm Pastor Luke.
I am Pastor Cameron.
And this is the Uncut Podcast, where we have honest, uncut conversations about faith, life, and ministry. Cameron, I was just looking at our, the show numbers and everything, and we are at 96 subscribers.
Whoa.
On YouTube. So we're just 4 short of 100. So that's of the time of this recording. So yeah, we've been at this for this will be episode 47. And we started this podcast in late January, I think, or early February. It's kind of confusing to me because I know we started recording earlier than we started releasing the episodes, but
yeah, we've had some bonus episodes, so it's not necessarily been one per week.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
So we're probably somewhere around, if we include the bonus episodes, I can think of 2, so that probably puts us at 49.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our episode numbers are our episode numbers, but if we stretch those out, it'd be almost a year's worth of episodes, essentially.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
So we're coming up. This will be our last episode for the year.
For 2023. Yep.
So we thought we would kind of take some time and just kind of reflect on what the podcast has been for us, things that we've maybe learned in the year in general, but also just kind of, do a bit of a year in review kind of episode. So, we've I was looking at the numbers and we've had somewhere around the vicinity of 10,000 downloads and listens.
Wow.
Across all the platforms. So that's YouTube and all the audio platforms and everything as well. So that's. Do
you know what platform experiences the most traffic with the?
I think YouTube definitely sees the biggest spikes. So if a episode does really well, I think we see more people pick that up there. I think our some of our most popular episodes, I think one of them has 1,200 views on it, something like that. So one of our episodes that we did maybe a month ago now, 2 months ago, on Andy Stanley. I think the first episode that we did on that, in his church conference about homosexuality, that's probably been our biggest episode.
Yep.
So, but we see a lot of consistency in our, actually, we see a fair amount of consistency in both YouTube and our audio podcast. We see around, I would say, we can, average between the two of them, we're consistently about 100 people we know listen to it on a regular basis. So maybe 45 on an audio download, maybe another 50 on YouTube. So that's kind of when we put out an episode, we know we're going to at least see that many people. So that's kind of what the numbers behind the scenes look like a little bit.
Great.
Yeah. So if any of you find that interesting or curious about that.
Yeah, but they probably don't. But
yeah, but that's just us just kind of, and figuring out what those numbers mean is always a difficult thing, but that's what they are. And, so it just lets us know, who's listening and,
Well, yeah, I think that one of the reasons that we started this was not even necessarily for the listener as much as, well, it was, but it was also to just give us a place or an opportunity to talk about some of the things that we didn't really have another environment or opportunity to talk about, and thought that, okay, well, maybe someone may find value in or benefit from the conversations that we were having. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen. I think at least some people would say that they find value in hearing.
I know people who tune in almost every week and, you know, make it part of their listening routine and, you know, appreciate them and hope that that's been a beneficial addition to their to their ingest of things over the year.
Well, what are some of the things that, as you look back on the last year, some of the things that are notable to you, or maybe that you learned significantly, or that, like, looking back on essentially the last year of recording podcast episodes, that you would say, like, okay, yeah, these things stick out to me.
Like, out of things we talked about?
Either things we talked about or just like things you learned about podcasting in general, or having these types of conversations, or like engaging, particularly on YouTube, engaging with the comment section, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned is, you know, it's kind of surprising where because like the entry point to podcasting isn't terribly difficult, right? Like, you can go get a microphone at a, you know, reasonable price at Walmart and start a podcast. But and there's a lot of tools that help us, you know, get the podcasts out each week and edit it and all of that without taking up too much time out of our schedules. But really, like, some of the biggest work for us has been at times finding that that right balance between, you know, a subject that is relevant to listeners, but also one that we kind of scratches that itch that we want to talk about. And kind of also the amount of, like, time that it's taken and it still is taking for us to even figure out what the show is.
Yep.
Like, what is it for us? What is it for those that listen? What are the types of things we talk about? And really, like, having to kind of work at, you know, we don't, you know, we sit down. Occasionally we have one or two scribbled notes, but we don't have a script in front of us. And it's not an interview necessarily. It's a conversation. And so, you know, turning on and hitting record without much of a plan, up front doesn't sound like it's too much work, but it's still a lot of kind of work for us to find what we're going to talk about and how to navigate that. So I think that was kind of a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
And how much podcasting is a bit of a consistency thing. Like, it's, you know, can you show up, turn it on, and, you know, record and do it. And kind of trust, even if some of the, like, listening and the results are maybe not visible, right? Because, you know, we get like a handful of comments on, like, our videos or things and stuff. But I also think about my own, like, listening habits and my own, like, YouTube habits and all that stuff. I almost never comment on anything that I watch or read or listen to. But that doesn't mean I didn't benefit from it, gain something from it, find value in it. And so there's a little bit of having to trust that there are people, and people we know that listen to it regularly, like, know that they are listening, know that they find value in it, even if they're not being vocal about it in the comment section. So there's a little bit of that, like, and, you know, anytime you create something and put something out, there's always this, like, vulnerable feeling of what do people think about it. And, you know, when you don't receive feedback, or when you receive some negative feedback, there has to be a willingness to let go of people's perception of you. Like, I don't know about you, but, like, there's definitely been comments that have come across our videos where I'm like, oh man, I want to argue with them, or I want to, like, defend myself, or I, you know, something like that.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's probably been one of the things that I've been most surprised at, or I guess one of the things that I've just learned the most over the last year of doing this is, particularly on YouTube, where the comment sections are, is that how much energy do I want to expend in engaging in the comment section?
Yeah.
knowing that there's not always the goal of the comment section is not always like a real pursuit of understanding.
No,
or
not
truth.
always.
Not always. I would say that for the most part, our comment sections have been pretty good.
Yeah.
They haven't really devolved into just flat out nonsense.
Sometimes. but we do have a fair amount of good faith comments.
Yes.
You know.
Even if they're difficult or disagree with us, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But the level of interaction that it takes to keep up with that kind of stuff is significant. I would say that one of the things that I have kind of learned even about myself is that, and I don't know if it's as I get older, as I get more experienced, as I don't really know what it is that I feel like I'm much less interested in stirring the pot than I was earlier in life and in ministry. I don't know if it's just like I don't feel like I have the energy for it anymore, or I'm not really interested in like defending my positions.
Yeah.
Or like being misunderstood or creating additional like fires. Right. I think that's maybe it, is like there are enough ministry fires that happen without me lighting the match that I don't really like. My energy to light the match is just really low.
Yeah.
Because there are still some things I think that we have had as topics for a long time that I have opinions about and that I think are valuable conversations, but that I know are not necessarily, not always necessarily like primary theological or things, but that we have had on our topics list for a long time that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
That would be things like, just as a general topic, like how Christians should engage or can think about like pro-life, pro-choice conversations and that debate. A lot of the we've got some questions about the contemporary role of women in ministry and the relevant scriptures or the cogent scriptures around those, and where we stand on that. And so topics like that. I mean, we've not avoided the topic of homosexuality or human sexuality in general, although we could.
There's still more to talk about.
There's so much more there. There's so much more. And I think, like you already said, the episode that we did on Andy Stanley's conference, which was our most viewed, most commented episode, I think is still a good episode. I don't know that I would go back and change anything that I said there.
Well, we were talking earlier, like there's a fair amount of comments, and some of the comments have kind of been generalized. You could generalize some of the comments of just us overcomplicating it. Like, why, if ultimately at the end we just disagree with Andy Stanley, why does it need to be a hour-long discussion where we kind of try and like go back and forth? Like, why not we just say he's wrong and kind of be done with it, Yeah.
Well, because to address that in particular, like I think some people generally just look at the title or listen to the first 5 minutes and are like, well, yeah, Andy Stanley's wrong. So why are you even talking about whether or not he's right or wrong?
Yeah.
But that wasn't even the basis of the episode.
No.
The basis of the episode was not whether or not Andy Stanley's views on homosexuality were right or wrong. We stated our views, it was whether or not necessarily it was wise of him or he should have, or like, what is the role of the church in engaging parents whose kids are expressing either same-sex attraction or having issues with gender or sexuality or whatever. And that's what the conference was about. It was like, okay, you're a parent, you have a child who is expressing some either homosexual attraction or behavior or questions about their own personal sexuality. How, as a Christian parent, now do you engage with your child in a way that maintains relationship with them, but does not compromise the
biblical conviction?
Biblical conviction or your own personal convictions. And so I see it as really two separate issues. Because the first person, one of my primary pastoral roles is to pastor my kids.
Right.
Or pastor my kids, And so, I could, if one of them expressed either same-sex attraction or issues with their sexual identity or anything like that, it would be really, I guess you could say, easy for me to say, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You can't think that way. You can't feel that way. You can't believe that way. And if you believe that way, you're not a part of this family and I've pastored enough people to know that approach, while maybe right in terms of the truth, almost always results in the ending of relationship. Yeah. It almost always results in the person walking away.
Saying, whoa, you can't accept me, then bye.
Either you can't accept me or this is not a safe relationship for us to disagree in.
Yeah.
I don't feel safe to even disagree. So how could I ever have vulnerable relationship, honest relationship with you if I feel like anytime we disagree, you're just going to cut me off?
Yeah.
And so we need to learn how to have conversation and be in relationship with people that we don't agree with without just saying like, I don't agree with you, therefore get out of my life. I don't think that that's always a wise or pastoral approach. And while I'm not willing to compromise on my convictions and what I believe the convictions of Scripture are, I am willing to compromise on my approach to people so that I can maintain relationship with them and pastor them through, hopefully, some of those really difficult things.
Yeah.
That is my calling.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too about the format of our discussions on here is that, like we said, like, we don't have a script. So a lot of times we're just thinking on our feet, or we're like processing through a topic or an idea as it comes up. We don't have the option of, or the luxury of kind of creating and crafting our particular thoughts ahead of time and then kind of editing them down. And so sometimes I think that's always been a little bit of my fear, is that people would see the thought process, the journey of where we're kind of coming through and all the different things that we're thinking about. And, maybe I think this, maybe I don't think this, and, and kind of judge the process and kind of be a little bit critical of that. That's where I've kind of felt like that episode's taken a little bit of some criticism. I was like, well, it's also just us thinking through it.
Right.
Like like, I don't know, there's wisdom in, if we just take the topic and then immediately jump to the conclusion and say, like, that might make a lot of people really happy, but at the same time, it's not intellectually honest. It's not honest, period, because we all have to kind of think through and process things. So, yeah, you felt like, to kind of go back to what you were saying, like, not necessarily afraid to stir the pot, but like sometimes maybe just a little reluctant to, or...
Yeah, I just, like, it you know, it takes a lot of energy to be constantly defending your positions, and like you said, we're letting people in, like look into sometimes a process of our discussion about what do I believe on this, or how has my belief changed over time, and it's a lot of things are much more nuanced in conversation than we would like, that people would like them to believe. The whole conversation on deconstruction, which we've had really several times over the course of the last year, scattered throughout lots of our episodes, has really been a conversation that we've been having with one another, but also with our listeners about why people deconstruct, what are some of the reasons theologically, sociologically, relationally, that cause, or that like push them into a deconstruction mindset. What should we do as the church? What should we do as pastors? What about some of those specific things, like in particular are, do we agree with? There's some things that we have said, yeah, I agree, like, with.
I think we did like things people deconstructed about the Bible, and a significant amount of those things that they the things that they came to change their beliefs. We were like, yeah, actually, that's what we believe. Like, we believe that that's a correct understanding of the Bible or that passage.
Right. And so, and there's also a little bit of, and this is something that I've learned over the years in ministry and just in life in general, is that, I know I've said this to you several times. I've said it to all of our staff. I've said, is that you're not going to convince someone of a different opinion who's committed to misunderstanding you.
Yeah.
Like, if someone is committed to misunderstanding any of your words, and like is only worried about making sure that they come out in the right, and like they're not really willing to have an honest conversation with it, then it doesn't matter what you say.
Yeah.
They're committed to their position of misunderstanding you. And so, it's like literally talking to a brick wall. And I don't have energy for that anymore. I don't have time for that anymore. I really just don't.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know, that there are people who are waiting to just bait me into conversation, even now. And I know it's kind of a catchphrase, but I got to protect my peace in some regards. Like, I got to limit people's access to my emotional energy, because I only have it in limited supply.
Yeah.
But I do value these conversations, and could probably use my own rationale there to push me into being willing to have some of those, more difficult conversations, women in ministry and pro-life, pro-choice, because like, you might as well just say what you're feeling, because you're not going to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding anyway. Right. So at least have the conversation.
Yeah. And all this is not to say that our podcast has by any means been a hotbed of like, think whatever scale you're thinking at, probably think smaller.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is always just that, there was, this was funny. So, like, insecurity is something that, like, it's something like it's something I've had to deal with, and my wager is that anybody in ministry has to deal with to some degree. Yep. And I was giving a sermon here, sometime over the last 2 years I've been here. I was giving a sermon, and I think I was saying something that it wasn't controversial. It was something that like I was pretty firmly believed. I knew that you would be in agreement with, but I was maybe saying it in a way where I was talking about it or approaching the passage in a way that was like might ruffle some people's feathers if they were in like a really conservative space, or they'd maybe always understood the passage one way and I was kind of coming at it from a different way, saying that's maybe not what the passage means. And a couple like got up and left in the middle of the sermon. And I didn't really know them at that time. And I was just like, what did I say? Like, what did I say that made them so angry they had to get up and leave in the middle? Now, that was Gordy and Jean.
Turns out she just wasn't feeling well.
She wasn't feeling well. I was like, overly paranoid and sensitive about that at that, but that's just a distraction that happens in the moment that you've got to kind of let go of a little bit. But all to say, I don't know why I brought all of that up, but maybe just to say that I think that is a fair, obstacle that we have to overcome in ministry in order to talk about these things, and in a increasingly public world where we put all of our sermons, we put these podcasts up online, which online is forever, right?
So they say.
So they say. And so, there is a little bit of like this, because it's become so easy to publish things, it takes a lot of work to publish a book, or at least it used to. Now you can, independently publish your book on Amazon, like in 10 minutes if you wanted to. And so there's that threshold to editing and publishing and putting something out there for everybody to see is just kind of dropped down. And the way that we function and do ministry requires that we make ourselves accessible in a teaching format in a way that a lot of people can access it. And so there is a little bit of I'm out here in all of my thoughts and all the things I say, and somebody could get really mad at me or something like that. That's a little bit of human experience behind all of it, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Shoot, there was something I was going to say and I've completely lost it. I'm interested to know if there are people out there listening now that would have, another thing that I do kind of wish was utilized a little bit better in our podcast in particular would be our text and our question line. I would like to hear more about what people are interested in hearing, or hearing, their pastors or two pastors talk about. We're not everyone's pastor that listens, because we do have a text line that we set up. It goes to neither of our phones, so it's not our number, but
we get a text message letting us know that you sent a message, so we see it.
But that's 716-201-0507. And that is just helpful for us to know, okay, here's something that is important or means something to someone else out there. All right, well, let's kind of talk about it and see what comes of it. So I do wish that we could figure out some way to leverage that a little bit more. But
I mean, it's always the difficulty of if someone who's listening has a question, do they think at the time, oh, that's a question I should send into the text line? And, so, and then there's always that, there's a threshold of the more people you get listening, only a certain percentage of them are going to have a question or think to send something in. Right. So, yeah, that's always, because there is something that is there's a good energy to answering questions that are, seeking in to kind of learn about things. Yeah. But you mentioned one of the topics that we probably talked about. There's a couple topics we talked about in a recurring sense, but definitely probably the biggest is deconstruction. What do you feel like your journey or your learning about deconstruction has been over the course of the year, both on the podcast and off the podcast? Like,
Yeah.
I know that's a big question because you've been doing a lot of thinking about that topic.
Yes, a lot. Here's been some of my experiences. The amount of topics or primary reasons that people deconstruct over are a lot wider than I maybe had originally anticipated. A lot more reasons have been given. I would say I'm surprised at the amount of questions or the amount of like things that come, the amount of times that I've heard people are deconstructing over a sense of like anti-supernaturalism, as well as probably the one that was most surprised at would be belief about hell, judgment, and eternal punishment. I think that's the one that I was the most surprised about.
Yeah.
Is that there is a sense like of rejection of any like eternal punishment, the concept or nature of hell or what it is. And all of that does, I think, doesn't boil down to, but it traces, a lot of those things trace their origin back into the what level of authority does Scripture have. Here's one of the things that has become one of the things that I suspected, and that every person who is deconstructed hard has been like, no, that's not the reason. But in every person that's deconstructed hard, this thing is evident, is that in the process of their deconstruction, they adopted some form of lifestyle that was more or less antithetical to Christian morality and ethics. But it has nothing to do with the fact that I've deconstructed.
Right.
Like there is a lifestyle, or there are lifestyle choices that I am now making that I didn't make when I was a practicing Christian. But it's not the reason that I deconstructed. I didn't let go of my Christian values, my Christian beliefs.
Because this is the thing
I wanted to do. Right. And I wouldn't do that at all. That's just disingenuous to even think it.
Right.
However, you might say, well, causation doesn't equal correlation type of thing, but it certainly is like evident in just about every situation that I've seen.
Yeah.
Every situation that I've encountered. So it seems hard for me to accept that part of the reason you were willing to deconstruct is because there was a lifestyle choice or decision that you wanted to make that you knew and know is antithetical to Christian teaching, Christian belief, Christian practice. And you just chose what you wanted to do. You just chose the lifestyle. And I would rather people just be honest than be like, no, Christianity is wrong for all of these reasons, and I just so happen to want to adopt, or I just so happen to fall into this lifestyle in the midst of my deconstruction. I think is just like, yeah.
So you kind of don't trust the self-diagnosis of people's deconstruction necessarily.
Not always, no. Yeah. I think sometimes it's just like, well, no, I think you just wanted to live that way. I think you just wanted to live that way.
Right.
And do you have legitimate questions about the Christian faith? Yeah, maybe. But I think that your legitimate questions about the Christian faith and the conclusions that you come to are heavily biased and lean towards the lifestyle that you wanted to live.
Yep.
Granted, I think people could say that about my beliefs too.
Sure.
You know, like for instance, okay, you were living in a heterosexual relationship while you were evangelical Christian, right? You have now deconstructed your evangelical Christianity and discovered that you're homosexual. And now believe that the scripture is in support of your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Shocking how, automatically the Bible says something different or means something different or can be interpreted now differently.
Yeah.
That you have skin in the game via your own lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's some disingenuity. You're being a little bit disingenuous sometimes. So, but I also think that there are some. I also do think that there are some legitimate emotional reasons that people deconstruct, and I think that there are some legitimate reasons that like people are hurt in the midst of the practice of their faith and with other people, and there's not a concept of what forgiveness is and also what forgiveness is not.
Yeah. Forgiveness is a big topic.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a topic that I feel like everybody has to wrestle with at some point.
Yeah. And some of the bigger questions about forgiveness is like, does forgiveness equal reconciliation of relationship?
Does the relationship need to go back to what it was?
Correct. Or does it need to go forward at all?
Right.
And what is the relationship between forgiveness and judgment or forgiveness and justice? Because I think a lot of times what we assume is that to forgive someone means they got away with it.
Yeah. But you can't actually forgive someone. In the act of forgiving is the act of acknowledging you did something wrong. I don't think it's forgiveness, like I'm a Midwesterner, right? So like everybody, somebody forgets an appointment or something like that and just stands me up. I sit on a coffee date all by myself. And they're like, "Oh, Luke," I'm like, "So sorry." And I'm like, "Oh, no big deal. Don't worry about it." Right? I didn't forgive them. I just like brushed it off. I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal." But like forgiveness in that instance would actually be like, yeah, like, it's, I forgive you. It's okay. We all forget things at times, not going to hold it against you. Like that would actually be forgiveness. I'm acknowledging that they did stand me up. It did kind of inconvenience me and hurt me. Like, cause I felt like unimportant to them or something like that. In order to give forgiveness, the person who's asking for forgiveness has to acknowledge that they did something wrong. And in the forgiving, you have to acknowledge that it was also wrong or hurtful.
That you were harmed, you were sinned against.
Right. If I just say, "Oh, it's not a big deal," or "Don't worry about it," like...
If it was a big deal, and you are worried about it.
I am worried about it, right? It's not Hakuna Matata.
Right.
So forgiveness can't exist without the acknowledgement of wrong done.
Yes. Right. Yeah, so like forgiveness is a big topic, and it is often a issue within the deconstructing movement. And I understand that.
Yeah.
I do. I understand how it can be misunderstood, how it can be used, misinterpreted.
Yeah.
So, I'm hopeful to be able to teach more on that this year. I've taught pretty significantly on it in the past. But I think that when we're willing to embrace true biblical forgiveness, we really do become free from a lot of our hurt. Not necessarily easily.
Yeah.
But it is the pathway. It is the pathway to being free from our hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not always require the reconciliation of relationship.
Yeah.
You can forgive without desiring or wanting or pursuing relationship with that person ever again.
Right.
Firmly believe that.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the things that, I've learned about deconstruction, or that I've, kind of encountered in my conversation with people who are, and it's been a lot. It's been a lot. And maybe hope to write on the topic someday, although I continue to say that. We both continue to say we're going to do more writing, and I never create a plan to do more writing, so I'm probably not going to do more writing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say? Any other reflections of the year or hopes for the new year?
I think that I think I want to continue to engage the topics that are getting a lot of interaction in the podcast. I think things around maybe more social issues, more conversations around deconstruction, because I believe they're important. And then maybe begin to tackle, some of the conversations that maybe I've been avoiding for the last year.
Yeah.
And just to see where they go. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm excited to kind of continue to see how this show kind of morphs and grows into what it's going to become. And I'm excited. The new year is always an opportunity to pause, to kind of refresh our focus and kind of, begin again in a sense, even though it is just the calendar flipping over. But it is take advantage of that opportunity. So I'm excited for, kind of resetting some of my life rhythms and getting back into some of this. I think what I'd like to do is create out maybe plan some interviews for the podcast, do a little bit more long-term planning so that we could bring some more intentionality that would alleviate some of the pressure of sitting down to the microphone to say, what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah. There was a period at the beginning where we had several episodes already recorded in the queue, so there wasn't as much pressure.
Yeah. So anything we can do to do that, but I think this has been a beneficial avenue, and I think the more the show grows into whatever it is going to be, I think that's I think that's where it's where it starts to shine, and so. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of excited, and I think it's been a helpful place to think out loud and challenge myself to say what I think and not just kind of because I'm the type of personality that will say, well, wow, that's an interesting thought, and just kind of keep my mouth shut as to what I actually think. And so a place where I have to kind of come down and land on a thought on something is a helpful exercise for myself personally too.
Agreed. Yeah. All right. Well, we hope you all have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, we won't put out an episode for probably a week or two or maybe more. So we just kind of, as the holidays happen and we travel, and we maybe just give ourselves a bit of a hiatus to refresh our years and get set for the new year and everything. But we'll be back. Send us your topics for the new year. What things should we talk more about in 2024?
Yep, 716-201-0507, or you can drop them in the comments in the YouTube video, or if you know us personally, don't hesitate to let us know what you'd like to hear more of.
Yeah. Appreciate all of you who are listening.
Thanks. See you next year.